Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Bangladesh is on the boil. The anti-quota protest has intensified. At least 32 people have died. Protesting students have called for a nationwide shutdown and rejected Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's offer of talks. India has issued a travel advisory. The US has issued condemnation. We look at the situation on the ground and how it poses a serious challenge to Sheikh Hasina. Meanwhile, in India, the Karnataka government's quota bill has been put on hold. We say it should be scrapped altogether. It's bad politics and bad economics. In the US, Trump's running mate J.D. Vance takes the stage at the Republican National Convention. We'll tell you what he said. On the other side, Joe Biden is down with the Wuhan virus. Campaigning has been put on hold as his party puts pressure on him to step aside. A special report on an Interpol operation that has cracked down on Africa's Black Axe gang. Why Germany has decided to cut aid to Ukraine. How Venezuela's upcoming election may end President Maduro's decade-long stint in power. As Israel keeps bombing Gaza and the world keeps looking away, India calls for a ceasefire. We look at Netanyahu's game plan. What is a suicide pod? A futuristic dystopian contraption set to launch in Switzerland. And is MSG truly a threat to public health? We look at research that busts some long-held myths about this flavor enhancer. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Egypt's Suez Canal reports a 23.4% drop in revenues. This is due to the disruptions in the Red Sea. Since November, Yemen's Houthi rebels have targeted Israeli-linked vessels in the Red Sea. The canal is a crucial source of foreign currency for Egypt, which is battling a severe financial crisis. In India, at least 2 people killed in a train accident in Uttar Pradesh. Several people also injured after a passenger train derailed, overturning several coaches. The train was travelling from Chandigarh to Dibrugarh. The cause of the accident is not yet clear. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen wins a second term. In 2019, she became the first woman leader of the European Commission. Von der Leyen is a former defence minister of Germany. She has promised to bolster the EU's defence capability and strengthen its industry. Vietnam's Communist Party hands over power to the president. It comes after the party chief had to step down temporarily for health reasons. Vietnam is headed by the Communist Party's General Secretary. The president's position is largely ceremonial. And Central Paris locks down for the Olympics. The opening ceremony will be held next week. Athletes have started arriving at the newly built Olympic Village. Securing the Games remains the top priority for the French authorities.
আমি প্রতিটি হত্যাকাণ্ডের নিন্দা জানাই।
We condemn any violence against peaceful protest.
Things are getting worse in Bangladesh. The protests are escalating. These are protests against job quotas. A lot of you have been writing to us from Bangladesh. We appreciate your emails, messages and comments, and we'll keep trying to show the full picture to the world. It's not a reassuring picture at the moment. There are armoured vehicles on the streets of Dhaka. Riot cops are on the prowl. They're using tear gas and rubber bullets to repel protesting students. Around 32 protesters have been killed so far. More than 500 have been injured and the death toll keeps rising. It was 6 yesterday, it was 16 in the evening and now it's 32. So the situation is spiraling out of control. Security forces have unleashed a brutal crackdown, yet the students are not backing down. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina offered to negotiate with them, but the students have rejected it. They plan to continue the protest. The Prime Minister also addressed the nation on Wednesday. She condemned the student deaths.
I seek forgiveness for the souls of those who have died. I express deep condolences to their family members. I firmly declare that those who carried out murders, looting, and violence, whoever they are, I will make sure they will be given the appropriate punishment.
The threat hasn't worked. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Dhaka, many of them carrying large sticks. They set fires in the middle of the road, attacked public property, and faced off with police officers. Take a look. Protesters also targeted the state television headquarters. They have set the building on fire. It is feared that many people are trapped inside. Now, we've covered this protest before. The issue here is a quota in government jobs. Bangladesh used to reserve 30% of jobs for freedom fighters, 30%. People who fought in the 1971 Liberation War, 30% of government jobs were reserved for them and their children and grandchildren. In 2018, there was pushback against this. Students said that the quota was unfair. It was robbing them of a fair opportunity. So in 2018, the quota was abolished. But this month, Dhaka's High Court reversed it. They brought the freedom fighter quota back. Hence these protests. And what has Sheikh Hasina done about it? At first she was dismissive, which made the students even more angry. But now she's trying to restore order. All schools and colleges have been shut indefinitely in the country. Security agencies have been deployed and mobile internet has been suspended. But the problem has not been solved. Bangladesh's Supreme Court will be hearing this matter next month. The government wants to expedite the hearing. But what happens if the top court also upholds the quota? Then it is up to the government again. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina says she is open to reforming the quota, but to what extent it's not clear. Plus, the quota has benefited her allies, so protesters ask, why would she reform it? It's a fair question. This unrest poses two main challenges to Sheikh Hasina. First is Western scrutiny. The US and Europe had criticized Bangladesh's recent elections. They said it wasn't free or fair. Hasina had brushed those claims aside. But this unrest is fresh ammunition for the West. Listen to the US State Department.
We've been watching this matter very closely, both from our embassy and officials here in Washington have been monitoring the protests, have seen the reports of people dying, being killed in the protests. And we, again, call on the government to uphold individuals' rights to protest peacefully.
I know what you're thinking. Why does Western opinion matter to Bangladesh? Because of money. Most of Dhaka's textile exports end up in the US and Europe, so Sheikh Hasina must be careful. She cannot give the West excuses to target her, or worse, sanction her trade. Challenge number 2 is internal. Public protests are a recurring problem in Bangladesh. Just look at this list. In 2010, garment workers protested. Hundreds of them took to the streets. They attacked vehicles, burnt tires and smashed shops. In 2013, the Shahbag protests happened. Tens of thousands of Bangladeshis demanded death penalty for a convicted war criminal. The same year, you had the Rana Plaza protests. A factory collapse killed more than 1,000 workers, so the backlash was immense. In 2018, Bangladeshis protested for road safety. The same year, they also protested against the 30% quota. And in 2022, the opposition organized a massive movement. Tens of thousands gathered in Dhaka. They demanded Sheikh Hasina's resignation. Now, this recent past makes one thing quite clear. Public protests are worryingly common in Bangladesh. The question is why? Government failure is one reason, but so is the nature of Bangladeshi politics. Sheikh Hasina has been in power since 2009, and in this period, she has cracked down on opposition leaders. They're unable to beat her at the polling booth. So what do? They hit the streets, especially the Jamaat-e-Islami. It's a radical Islamist party in Bangladesh. They're known for hijacking public protests, which is why the Prime Minister must be careful. She may have tamed protests before, but she cannot be complacent. Right now, the protests are only about the quota, but remember, Bangladesh has other problems too. For example, inflation is inching close to 10%. How long before that discontent spills over? It's a worry for Prime Minister Hasina, and it's a worry for India too. Dhaka has been a reliable and close ally for New Delhi. So far, the Indian government has not commented on the unrest, but the Indian mission has issued an advisory. Indians have been asked to avoid travel in Bangladesh. New Delhi will be hoping that the violence stops, because ignoring student deaths is not a good look in diplomacy. Speaking of India and quotas, we have some news from the state of Karnataka. It is home to India's Silicon Valley, the city of Bengaluru. But right now, it's making news for an anti-business move. A job quota in the private sector. For whom? Kannadigas, or the natives of the state. Now, a disclaimer first. The state government has put this bill on hold, but it's still important to talk about it, about why it's a really bad idea. First, the backstory. Regional identity plays a key role in Karnataka politics, a lot more than in other states. The 2011 census found that there are 3.2 million migrants in Karnataka. These are people from other states. 3.2 million, many of them live in Bengaluru. In fact, around 50% of the city's population is made up of migrants. Pro-Kannadiga groups do not like that. They say it's erasing the native identity. So the government, the state government, is capitalizing on that outrage. Now let's talk about the bill. It was cleared by the cabinet, the state cabinet, on Tuesday. It has two major clauses. One, 75% non-management jobs must be reserved for locals. And two, 50% of management jobs must also be reserved for locals. What if qualified locals are not available? The bill says, find and train them. And who qualifies as a local? Someone born and living in Karnataka for 15 years. They must be capable of reading, writing and speaking Kannada. Now the problem here is obvious. Private companies chase profits. They look for the most qualified candidate, not the minority candidate, not the local candidate, only the best candidate. If you stop companies from doing that, they will lose money and eventually they will leave. That's what a body of software companies has said. Listen to this. I'm quoting, "This bill will hamper the growth of the industry, impact jobs and the global brand of the state. The bill threatens to drive away companies and stifle startups." Neighboring states sensed an opportunity here, like the state of Andhra Pradesh. Their government started wooing software companies. They said, leave Karnataka, come to Andhra Pradesh. And the pushback worked, because the Karnataka government has now put the bill on hold. They're saying the policy will be reviewed. But let's hope that it's shelved forever, because such quotas are dangerous for the country. They have three main problems. First is the legal problem. Other states have also tried local quotas. Andhra Pradesh, for one, tried it in 2018. They wanted to reserve 75% jobs in a certain salary bracket. The court said it may be unconstitutional. The state of Haryana tried it in 2020, but this time the court went a step ahead. It struck down the quota for locals. So such moves have not stood the test of law, and India's constitution is quite clear about this. You can live and work anywhere in India, anywhere in the country. No government can infringe on that right. So that's the legal challenge. The second problem is financial. If you tell companies who to hire, they will push back. If you meddle too much, they will leave. As simple as that. But the third problem is arguably the most important problem, the political problem. Quotas for locals is a Pandora's box. It opens the door to chauvinism and hyper-regionalism. Yes, we must protect regional differences and identities, but not by excluding fellow Indians. Consider this. We said that 3.2 million migrants live in Karnataka. 3.2 million Indians from other parts of the country live in Karnataka. But 2.5 million Kannadigas also live in other states. How would they feel if those states implemented a similar law? If they were kept out of jobs? And don't get me wrong, Kannadigas have every right to a fair share of their state's prosperity, but it's the how that matters. You must invest in education and health. You must train your students. You must prepare them to be employed. That's how you protect the local population, not by keeping others out.
We will protect the wages of American workers.
It was day 3 of the Republican National Convention, and for a change, the focus was not on Donald Trump. It was on his running mate, J.D. Vance. He was nominated by party delegates earlier this week, and on Wednesday he accepted the nomination. Then came the speech, arguably the most important moment in Vance's career. In front of him was a packed stadium. Thousands of Americans were also watching at home, so J.D. Vance had to deliver. He was introduced on stage by his wife, Usha Vance. Take a look at this.
When J.D. met me, he approached our differences with curiosity and enthusiasm. Although he's a meat and potatoes kind of guy, he adapted to my vegetarian diet and learned to cook food from my mother, Indian food. Before I knew it, he had become an integral part of my family. It is my great privilege to introduce my husband and the next Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance.
How about that? Trump's running mate can cook Indian food. But he wasn't selected for that. Vance was picked for mainly 2 things: his working class background and his utmost loyalty to Donald Trump. So his speech focused on those 2 things. Vance talked about his difficult upbringing, his service in the US military, and his ability to deliver Midwestern swing states. Must have been music to Trump's ears.
This moment is not about me. It's about the auto worker in Michigan, wondering why out-of-touch politicians are destroying their jobs. It's about the energy worker in Pennsylvania and Ohio who doesn't understand why Joe Biden is willing to buy energy from tin-pot dictators across the world when he could buy it from his own citizens right here in our own country. We will protect the wages of American workers and stop the Chinese Communist Party from building their middle class on the backs of American citizens. Mr. President, I will never take for granted the trust you have put in me. And what an honor it is to help achieve the extraordinary vision that you have for this country.
It's a good contrast. Trump is a billionaire real estate mogul. He was born with a silver spoon, so it's hard for him to reach out to working class Americans, especially the undecided ones. And that's where J.D. Vance comes in. At 39 years of age, he's not a seasoned politician. In fact, his career in the U.S. Congress started only 2 years ago in 2022. That's when Vance was elected to the US Senate. Yet Trump is betting on him. Do you know why? Because J.D. Vance has an excellent story to tell. Born in a poor family, raised by a mother who was addicted to drugs, fought in the Iraq War, and married to the daughter of Indian immigrants. It makes for an excellent campaign pitch. And that's what Vance did on Wednesday.
In my life, I had a guardian angel by my side. She was an old woman who could barely walk, but she was tough as nails. I called her Mamaw, the name we hillbillies gave to our grandmothers. Our movement is about single moms like mine, who struggled with money and addiction, but never gave up. And I'm proud to say that tonight my mom is here, 10 years clean and sober. I love you, Mom.
Trump isn't exactly known as a family man, so these moments will help politically. But let's look beyond his performance at the convention. What should the world make of Vance's nomination? How is the Biden camp reacting to it? As things stand, Vance is pitted against Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris says she's ready to debate Vance, but the Trump campaign says, hold on, Harris and Biden have not been nominated yet. For all we know, the Democrats could change their ticket. So the Trump campaign wants to wait until the Democratic convention. And when is that? August 19th in Chicago. It looks like the Biden camp has figured out a strategy. They're attacking Vance on mainly one issue, and that is his position on abortion.
Recently, the former president selected his running mate the Senator Vance, J.D. Vance, understand. This is a fellow who in the United States Senate participated in blocking protections for IVF. This is an individual who has said he is for a national and has made every indication that he is for a national abortion ban.
It's a good strategy. Vance has called for a nationwide ban on abortion. He's even opposed exceptions in cases of rape or incest. That's more radical than Trump's position. He has since dialed down the rhetoric, but the Democrats are pouncing on it. So that's Vance and his domestic pitch. Now let's look at his foreign policy pitch. As Trump's running mate, his words carry weight. When J.D. Vance speaks, he speaks for Donald Trump, which is why his recent speeches are going viral. Vance recently took aim at the Labour Party in the UK. He effectively called them Islamists. Listen to this.
I was talking about, what is the first truly Islamist country that will get a nuclear weapon? And we were like, maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan already kind of counts. And then we sort of finally decided maybe it's actually the UK, since Labour just took over.
The UK's Deputy Prime Minister has hit back. She says Vance is known for saying fruity things. So that's one US ally already angry. But one US rival is also quite happy, and that's Russia. Vance has talked about cutting off military aid to Ukraine. Trump has called for peace negotiations. So Moscow is clearly betting on the Republicans. Their foreign minister praised Vance's position.
He's in favor of peace, in favor of ending the assistance that's been provided. And we can only welcome that, because that's what we need. To stop pumping Ukraine full of weapons, and then the war will end. And then we can look for solutions.
What about India? His connection is mainly via his wife. Like I said, she is the daughter of Indian immigrants. But beyond that, Vance has not said much. He may use the personal connection to woo Indian origin voters, but policy-wise, that won't really matter. So that was J.D. Vance's day at the Republican convention. Now the focus shifts to Donald Trump. He will be speaking later today. Reports say Trump will focus on unity after the assassination bid. I guess this convention has made one thing quite clear. Republicans are focusing on personal capacity and charisma. They've got two very colorful candidates in Trump and Vance. The Democrats cannot match that. So they're focusing more on policy. The question is, what will Americans prioritize? We're 4 months away from finding out.
I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. And now I want to hand it over to the President of Ukraine, ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. I know I'm only 41.
Yes, Joe Biden is stumbling again. As they say, when it rains, it pours, and Biden is caught in the perfect storm. Just when it looked like it couldn't get worse, it did. After the setbacks of the last few weeks, the president is down with the Wuhan virus now. He tested positive yesterday, and this is a big blow to his campaign. Biden has gone into isolation, but before doing that, he was asked about his health, and he said he's doing fine. Biden was in Las Vegas to campaign. He had to cut his trip short, and he'll be out of action for a while, but it won't be a long break because he cannot afford that. His party is already losing patience with him. Influential Democrats are turning against Joe Biden, like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and Hakeem Jeffries. These are the top Democrats in the U.S. Congress. Biden leans on them to build support for his legislative agenda. In recent days, they've all spoken to Biden about his campaign and about his chances of re-election. And Chuck Schumer was quite blunt. He believes if Biden carries on, the Democrats could suffer losses in the U.S. Congress too. Hakeem Jeffries gave a similar assessment to the president. What about Nancy Pelosi? Reports say that she's convinced that he will lose, that Joe Biden cannot defeat Donald Trump. That's Pelosi's view. So there is pushback from senior Democrats. Biden has been trying to counter them through some public statements. He says the average Democrats are with him, whatever that means. And even that rings hollow, by the way. A new poll has come out today. It has punctured Biden's claims. It says only 3 out of 10 Democrats, average Democrats, still support Joe Biden for a second term. The majority wants him to withdraw, which brings us to the second major challenge for the party. Who will replace Joe Biden? Who is the best candidate for the job? Can it be Kamala Harris? She can be a consensus choice. That's what another poll says. Another poll was held in 6 American swing states, also called the battleground states. That's because voters here do not have a set preference. They keep swinging between Democrats and Republicans, hence the name swing states. Now, a poll was conducted here and it found that Kamala Harris could be the best replacement for Biden. But that's assuming that the president will step down. He says he won't. He believes he can still turn this around. Before going into isolation, Biden gave an interview. Listen to what he said.
I feel good. I feel as good as I did before. Look, one of the things is most communities don't really begin to focus on the election until they get into September. And so all the talk about who's leaning where and how, it's just kind of, you know, everything so far between Trump and me has been basically even. And so, but I feel good because, look, the way Trump has characterized the community is quite frankly sick.
Biden believes the polls could show a different picture in September. That's a very optimistic view. Also, it was expressed before he tested positive, but now this new bout of illness puts the public focus back on his health, and that's something that Biden and his team were desperately trying to avoid. So his re-election hinges on the health factor. Is he fit enough to continue? Can he sustain for 4 more years? Can he handle the pressures, physical and mental, of being a president? More and more people believe he cannot. And there's no doubt that he's falling ill more often. During the debate with Trump, Biden was not coherent. He sounded raspy. His aides had blamed the debacle on a cold and a jet lag.
I was back in the United States 12 or 13 days before the debate. So his explanation for a poor debate performance is jet lag.
So what I want to say is it's the jet lag and also the cold.
Now, Biden is in isolation. He's being treated for the Wuhan virus. It's his second break in less than 2 weeks. Earlier, he'd paused all campaign activities in the wake of the Trump shooting. Different reasons, yes, but the impact is the same. Every day away from the campaign is a day wasted, and you cannot afford that during election season, especially if your health is being questioned. You have to be out and about. You have to prove that you're fit by campaigning hard, by surviving the grind of rallies and speeches, by being more visible. Joe Biden understands that. He says he'll step down if he is diagnosed with a medical condition.
Is there anything that you would look to, you personally, not anybody else, not other pundits, not even perhaps family members, that you would look to say, if I see that, I will reevaluate?
If there had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem.
The thing is, voters may not wait for a doctor's certificate. Biden should use this period of isolation to reflect on his chances and his capabilities and step aside instead of waiting to be pushed aside. Our next story is about a police operation, a global investigation conducted across 5 continents called Operation Jackal 3. The operation was conducted by Interpol, and among their targets was a notorious gang, a group that originated in West Africa, in Nigeria, but now it spans the globe. It is called Black Axe. Black Axe is involved in almost every type of organized crime: drug smuggling, human trafficking, murder, extortion. But the gang is best known for cyber crimes, for financial fraud committed online. Interpol was going after cyber criminals, including those from Black Axe. They've arrested hundreds of gang members and seized assets worth millions. Here's our report.
72 people were arrested in Argentina. The police seized $1.2 million in high-quality counterfeit banknotes. About 100 suspicious bank accounts were frozen. In Switzerland, the police arrested multiple suspects. They seized cocaine and about $49,000 in cash. In Portugal, a criminal recruitment network was dismantled. About 25 people were arrested. The police seized phones and computers which had details about money laundering schemes. In Ireland, there have been 63 arrests. 2 cars and stolen goods worth about $55,000 were seized. The police also confiscated more than $88,000 in cash and more than $250,000 in cryptocurrency. 4 different countries, dozens of people arrested, millions in ill-gotten wealth seized. What's the common thread? All of these police raids were part of a global operation called Jackal 3. The operation was conducted by Interpol. It's the 3rd operation of its kind, and the biggest one yet. But the target of the Jackal operations is always the same: cyber criminals, mostly linked to West Africa. Interpol's Director of Financial Crime said, and I quote, "The volume of financial fraud stemming from West Africa is alarming and increasing. This operation's results underscore the critical need for international law enforcement collaboration to combat these extensive criminal networks." And the most notorious network is a gang from Nigeria, from Benin City in the Edo state. It is known as Black Axe. It was founded in 1977 as a student fraternity in the University of Benin, Nigeria. It began as a Pan-African movement. But reports say that this changed over time. The group first became a cult, and then a global mafia, which specializes in cybercrime. It is also involved in drug trafficking and human smuggling. But Black Axe specializes in cybercrime. Business email compromise, or BEC in particular. This is when a scammer pretends to work for a legitimate business, either by creating a legitimate-looking company email ID or hacking into a real firm's email account. They contact potential victims with the business email IDs and demand payments. This type of crime has been on the rise. In 2023, almost $3 billion was stolen this way. And that's just the reported amount. A lot of people don't report cybercrimes, so the number could be much higher. Overall, more than $12.5 billion was stolen by cybercriminals in 2023, and Black Axe was behind a number of these robberies. That's why their members featured prominently among the people arrested in Operation Jackal 3. The operation took place between the 10th of April and the 3rd of July. Interpol just released the final figures. About 300 people have been arrested across 21 countries in 5 continents. About 400 additional suspects have been identified, and about 720 bank accounts have been frozen. But is this enough? Because cybercrime has been growing exponentially, thanks to gangs like Black Axe.
Now let's talk about Ukraine. In the last 24 hours, Kiev received some good news and some bad news. Let's start with the good news. Ukrainian President Zelensky is in the UK today attending a European Community Summit, being hosted by Britain's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Starmer is going out of his way to assure Zelensky that Britain has his back.
So our first task here today is to confirm our steadfast support for Ukraine, to unite once again behind those values that we cherish, and to say we will face down aggression on this continent together. Because the threat from Russia reaches right across Europe.
Starmer is sending a message. Like Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson before him, Starmer will continue to help Ukraine. That's the message, and that was the good news. And it must have been music to Zelensky's ears, because lately he would have been hearing a more ominous sound, the whispers of his Western allies abandoning him, starting with his most important ally, the United States of America. There was always a good chance that Donald Trump would win this year's election and return to the White House, but that possibility became more real this week, after the attempt on Trump's life. He seems closer to power than ever before, and that is bad news for Ukraine, because Trump has been quite clear. He wants to stop funding Kiev. He wants to push for talks between Ukraine and Russia. Whether this happens or not, The message is clear. Trump has no interest in burning money on Zelensky. And now Trump has chosen J.D. Vance as his running mate, a man who openly doesn't care for Ukraine. So Zelensky's days of getting American money may be numbered. And that alone could be enough to cost him the war. Without American support, Ukraine will struggle to keep Russia at bay. But perhaps it could manage for a while, grind it out for a few years. That may have been a possibility until this news came in from Germany. The German government passed its budget yesterday, the budget for 2025, and there was a small detail that stood out. The amount Berlin set aside for aid to Kiev. That amount was about $8.7 billion in 2024, but in 2025, Germany has only allotted half that amount, a straight 50% cut. Berlin defended this move. Their finance minister, Christian Lindner, made his excuses after the budget. He said that Ukraine's funding was secured because of money from frozen Russian assets. This was a plan the West had devised a few weeks ago to loan Ukraine $50 billion, using the proceeds from frozen Russian assets in their possession. Germany says that this plan will result in Ukraine having plenty of money. So it doesn't need to set aside too much for additional aid. That was the excuse. But is that the only reason that Berlin is cutting funds for Ukraine? Lindner also had this to say.
Germany continues to be strongly engaged on an international level, but to some extent, weight is being shifted. We have to invest a lot more in our hard security, and at the same time, we cannot continue to be involved across the world like we used to be.
He said Germany needs to invest money in hard security. That means defense spending, and it could explain the decision behind cutting funds for Ukraine. Germany is a member of NATO, but it doesn't really pull its weight. Germany has systematically underinvested in its military. Berlin has gotten away with this for years, but it might not work anymore, especially if Trump returns to the White House, because Trump has been clear on this too. Every NATO member must contribute its fair share. They must spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense. That is what Trump wants. Now that his return seems imminent, Germany seems to be scrambling, trying to arrange the required funds from all available sources, including the money they set aside for Ukraine. This is another blow for Kiev, and it might not stop here. So the question is, if other NATO countries follow Germany's example, if they too pull aid for Ukraine, how long before Kiev capitulates? Our next story is from Venezuela, a South American country with the world's biggest known oil reserves and an increasing number of Western sanctions. Venezuela is heading to polls this month, and one person is prominent on the ballot: President Nicolas Maduro. So much so that his face appears 13 times on the ballot. But will that help him win the election? This time he cannot count on it, because for the first time in a decade, Maduro is facing a challenge from the opposition. His chief opponent, Gonzalez, is ahead in the polls. Maduro has been president since 2013. Under him, the economy has halved and 1/5 of the population has left the country. So will this election be the end of the road for him? Or can he find a way to keep his grip on power? Our next report tells you.
This is the ballot for Venezuela's upcoming presidential election. Notice something strange? Well, it's right there. That is the face of Nicolas Maduro. And it appears not just once or twice, but 13 times. In fact, it takes up the entire top row of the ballot. So why is Maduro's picture there 13 times? Well, it's for all political groups he's representing. Now, this isn't unusual for Venezuela. Multiple parties often nominate the same candidate. But 13 times is a lot. It makes Maduro the easiest to identify. Venezuela's ballot has 38 political parties. It's to make the elections feel democratic. However, it's anything but free and fair.
If you don't want Venezuela to fall in a bloodshed, in a fratricidal civil war, because of the fascists, then let's guarantee the biggest electoral success in the electoral history of our people.
Venezuela is heading to polls on July 28th. The country has 17 million eligible voters. This is Venezuela's first election since 2018. On one side is Nicolas Maduro. He's the incumbent. He belongs to the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. Maduro was elected as president in 2013, so this is his 11th year in office. Maduro is the heir to Hugo Chavez, a popular socialist who expanded Venezuela's welfare state. After Chavez died, Maduro won the elections. In 2018, he was re-elected again. The election was seen as a sham, and Maduro's popularity took a hit. After all, he presided over Venezuela's economic collapse. Millions left the country. There's corruption and government mismanagement. But Maduro doesn't seem to be too bothered. He looks to be dancing his way to victory. But his happy dance could soon be over. For the first time in a decade, Maduro is facing a credible challenge. And it comes from this man, Edmundo Gonzalez. Gonzalez started his diplomatic career as the aide to Venezuela's ambassador in the United States. His last post was as an ambassador to Argentina. Since then, he's become an international relations consultant. So how did Gonzalez become a threat to Maduro? It's because of Maria Corina Machado. She is a former lawmaker. In 2023, she emerged as the star of the opposition. She rallied millions against mismanagement. But Machado's name is not on the ballot. She was barred from running. So she has decided to back Gonzalez. Together, they're campaigning to defeat Maduro.
Let's turn that desire of change into votes. I count on you and you count on me.
Which brings us to the election itself. Will it be free and fair? Last year, Maduro held secret negotiations with the US State Department. He promised to hold free and fair elections. In exchange, Washington would lift its sanctions on Venezuela. But the deal is in jeopardy after Machado was barred. So while the election may not have a level playing field, Venezuelans are still optimistic. Polls show that Gonzalez is currently 20 percentage points ahead of Maduro. So he could win. But the government has had a long history of rigging elections. So will Maduro win another 6 years in office, or will the resurgent opposition assume power in Venezuela? Well, we'll find out by the end of this month.
What happens when war becomes the new normal? When deaths are mere statistics? It's happening in Gaza right now. Every day we see the headlines. There are airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. Hundreds of people die. But Israel gives no explanation and the world doesn't condemn it. It just moves on to the next big event. How is that okay? It's been 10 months since this war began. 38,500 people have been killed. Tens of thousands do not have a home. Children are starving and Israeli hostages are still being held in Gaza. Yet there seems to be no end to the attacks. Looks like Israel's game plan is only war. But how is that sustainable? Yesterday, India spoke about this at the United Nations. It called for a ceasefire in Gaza.
India was among the countries which strongly and unequivocally condemned the terror attacks on Israel on 7th October 2023. We have also condemned the loss of civilian lives in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. We have called for restraint, de-escalation, and emphasized peaceful resolution of the conflict through dialogue and diplomacy. We have also urged adherence to international law and international humanitarian law under all circumstances. We reiterate the call for an immediate, full and complete ceasefire, safe, timely and sustained humanitarian assistance and unrestricted access to relief and essential humanitarian services in the Gaza Strip.
India's point is very simple. End the war, return the hostages, allow aid to pass and stop the killing of civilians. But for any of this to happen, Israel has to agree. It has to want a ceasefire. But does it? I'll tell you why I ask this. Until last week, a ceasefire deal was on the table. It was proposed by the United States. Hamas seemed okay with it. The talks were making good progress. But then Israel bombed a safe zone. More than 90 people were killed in that strike. So Hamas left the talks. And it's not the first time something like this has happened. In the month of May, Gaza was days away from a ceasefire. And what did Israel do? It sent tanks into the city of Rafah. Another example is from last November. The two sides were close to a truce. That's when Israel stepped up the strikes. Basically, every time there's talk of peace, Israel escalates the war. What explains this? There could be two possible reasons. The first is to pressurize Hamas. If Israel ramps up the attacks, Hamas has its back to the wall. So it is more likely to make concessions. That could be one reason. The other argument is that Israel just doesn't want this war to end, or more precisely, Netanyahu doesn't want the war to end. When Hamas attacked on October 7th, Israel set two goals. One, bring back all the hostages, and two, destroy Hamas. Now, a ceasefire deal can achieve the first goal, the release of the hostages. As far as destroying Hamas is concerned, before October, they had around 30,000 fighters. Israel's army says it has killed 13,000 of them. But top Hamas commanders are still alive. So what exactly is Israel's goal? Killing all people affiliated to Hamas in the Gaza Strip? Or just eradicating the top commanders, or both? Israel has not clarified. And critics say this is part of Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan. If he doesn't define a goal, he won't be under pressure to stick to it, let alone try to achieve it. Because now this war is helping no one but Benjamin Netanyahu. He is the only person benefiting. The longer the war, the longer he can remain in power. And some of his allies support this strategy.
I came here to the most important place for the state of Israel, the people of Israel, to pray for the hostages. May they return home without a reckless deal, without surrender. I am praying and also working hard for the Prime Minister to have courage not to concede and to go on until victory is achieved, to add military pressure, to stop the fuel, to win.
That was Ben Gvir, Israel's far-right security minister. He was at the Al-Aqsa Mosque praying for the return of hostages, but he won't accept a ceasefire deal. That's how Israel's government is approaching this. They plan to fight on. But the people of Israel have a different opinion. They want the hostages back, and they want them now.
Calling for the Prime Minister to seal this deal, the Defense Minister and all the security services telling us this is the right moment to close this deal.
There is more than 9 months in the captivity in Gaza, and I'm here to make everything and to put all the efforts to bring them home. We are here asking our Prime Minister not to fly before he's making the deal, before he's signing the deal.
Israelis want a peace deal. Their government wants war. Caught in between are 100 hostages and tens of thousands of Gazans, while the rest of the world is busy looking away. Technology can both amaze and horrify us. Our next story tonight is more about the latter, the horrific part, courtesy a new product on the market, a suicide pod. It is exactly what it sounds like. A pod meant to assist suicides. It is a futuristic-looking contraption. Once a person climbs into it, nitrogen gas will be released, oxygen will be eliminated, and within minutes the person will die, all at the cost of just $20. It is the very definition of dystopian. Understandably, the pod has received severe backlash. It has been met with calls for bans. But the makers are undeterred. They plan to launch the suicide pod in Switzerland. Here's a report.
This is Sarko, the Tesla of euthanasia. At least that's what it's been dubbed, because this is a suicide pod. In crass but simpler terms, it's a portable machine to kill oneself. This is a futuristic-looking 3D printed machine. It was first unveiled in 2019. Ever since then, it has been mired in controversy, and expectedly so. But now the drama has reached new heights, because for the first time it will be open to use.
That releases the lid. The lid is very light to touch, so it's very...
The details are not clear yet, but the pod is expected to be launched in Switzerland and put to use in the coming months. Why Switzerland? Because of their law. Assisted suicide has been legal in the country since the 1940s. And there are two requirements. First, the person wishing to die must pass a psychiatric test. Secondly, the assisted suicide has to be performed by someone with no direct interest in the death. The procedure is straightforward. There are legal guardrails. This makes Switzerland among the best options for assisted suicide, not just for its own citizens, but globally. The country is now called a suicide tourism magnet. So Switzerland was the obvious pick. But what differentiates the pod from other means of euthanasia? How does it work? After the psychiatric test is complete, the pod will allow a person to die without the requirement of medical supervision. The makers say it will reduce the dependence on doctors.
So they climb in to the capsule, they close the lid, they will be asked questions, and that part works. A few questions are asked to see whether they know what they're doing. Who are you? Where are you? What happens if you press the button? That allows the power to come onto the sarco, and then the person says, if you want to die, the voice says in the processor, press this button. The person presses the button. Immediately in the base, the generator, a large quantity of nitrogen is produced, which eliminates all of the oxygen in the actual capsule.
Once the button is pressed, the expected time frame is 5 minutes before death occurs. The pod has been primarily built for people with serious physical illnesses. Plus, it's relatively cheap. It costs $20, so it's accessible. But the idea has invited more discomfort than praise. The pod has received severe backlash.
This is a solution that we really don't understand, which is luxurious. We could call it that. That is the design. But it seems totally inappropriate to us. The way we work, using pentobarbital, which is prescribed by a doctor, which allows people to die gently, surrounded by their loved ones, friends, and children, is a death that is so much more serene than shutting oneself up alone in a sarco, even if that sarco happens to be facing the Matterhorn.
Authorities have suggested that the device should be banned. They have called for severe punishment for those assisting the suicide and the inventor. Critics call him Dr. Death. But the inventor is sticking to his guns, or pod, in this case.
It's not just some medical privilege for the very sick. It's a fundamental human right. If you've got the precious gift of life, you should be able to give that gift away at the time of your choosing.
So that's the logic, returning a gift. But one thing that takers should know is once a decision is made, they won't be able to change their minds. Because once you press that button, there's no going back.
MSG is having a renaissance, or should we say it is finally getting vengeance. Tonight we'll tell you why. But first the basics, what is MSG? Our story begins in the year 1907, when a Japanese chemist boiled down edible seaweed to extract what's called glutamate. Glutamate gives foods a brothy, savory flavor. The chemist called this taste umami. In fact, he coined the term. Then he took the glutamate and reduced it to a white crystallized powder. This powder is called MSG, that's short for monosodium glutamate, or MSG. It is added to food just like salt and sugar. MSG is a flavor enhancer. It gives food the umami taste. Soon after the discovery, a Japanese company started manufacturing MSG. The company was called Ajinomoto. Now, Ajinomoto is to MSG what Xerox is to photocopies. They become synonymous. The product has become synonymous with the brand. So MSG was being mass-produced. It was winning awards. As a prized addition to middle-class kitchens, it was a global hit. But the trend did not last. In the late 1960s, a US doctor ate Chinese food at a restaurant. He experienced palpitation, weakness, and numbness in his neck, and he blamed MSG for it. He also wrote an article about it in a medical journal. Now remember, this was a letter. It was not a study, not a report. He made a correlation and wrote about it, and he called it the Chinese restaurant syndrome. Now you know the rules. Give anything a funky name and it takes off. The doctor's words had a ripple effect. The world over, restaurants swore off MSG. People blamed it for their discomfort. Other researchers jumped on the bandwagon and substantiated this claim. Soon, MSG was the new public health villain. So in a gist, there was a teaspoon of medical legitimacy, a tablespoon of assumption, and a dash of racism. This was a recipe for disaster. But about half a century later, vindication finally came, and it was sweet, or shall we say, it was high in umami. Decades of scientific trials have failed to prove that MSG sensitivity exists. Newer and more extensive research says this ingredient is safe. There is no evidence that says otherwise. Experts say the ingredient was wrongly maligned, and governments around the world have listed MSG as safe. This is not to say that all the claims were bogus. People can be sensitive to MSG, just as they can be sensitive to any food. They can experience headaches, chest pains, or numbness when consuming high levels of this ingredient. But even then, such reactions are rare. They're typically mild, and they go away without treatment. So experts say MSG is not dangerous. In fact, it may help you. It contains about 12% sodium. Salt, on the other hand, has 40% sodium. Now let me state the obvious. Nearly everyone on the planet consumes too much salt. On average, double the advised intake. According to the World Health Organization, if salt intake is reduced, 7 million lives can be saved by 2030. And scientists agree. In fact, they have a ready replacement in mind and no points for guessing, yes, it is MSG. MSG is not the perfect replacement, but the right amount of intake can reduce salt consumption by between 20 to 40%. So if we believe recent studies, MSG is a promising salt replacement, which is a relief and a reason to celebrate for MSG fans, because until now their love affair was forbidden. MSG had a bad rep, so it had to be kept under wraps, but not anymore. Chinese fried rice, Vietnamese noodles, even popcorn, MSG is elevating flavors across dishes. It is a rage on TikTok, where users are happily adding it. Celebrity chefs are championing it. Restaurants are serving MSG martinis and putting MSG shakers next to salt and pepper. So this is the bottom line. Yes, there are published studies which link MSG to negative health outcomes, but as of today, none of them hold in the court of scientific research. Experts and health authorities say MSG is safe. Most people can enjoy it. It may sound controversial, but it is true. Remember when Pluto was considered a planet? It was once true, but it's not anymore, because like everything else in our world, science evolves. So go ahead and enjoy your fried rice and noodles, because the biggest challenge for MSG is not scientific, it is cultural. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Deadly fire kills 16 people at a shopping mall in southwestern China. A huge salt lake dries out in Serbia as the country grapples with a heat wave. And a zoo in Germany shows off two newborn Amur tigers to the public. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1947, the Indian Independence Act was cleared by the British Parliament. This act divided British India into two new independent nations, India and Pakistan. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
The cheerful atmosphere prevailing makes his long-awaited broadcast.
across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree. One tree for humanity. One tree for Mother Earth. One tree for a future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On the show today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
We start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. The first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost.